So what I did is I started out with just a basic folder, you know, nothing fancy, no brads, nothing. But you can see that the way it's folded, it's offset. So there's like, you know, 1/4 of an inch, that this is bigger than this one. So I took that and I actually used that. This is my cover. Anyway, well, I used my scoreboard that I have, and I laid it out, and this is the original score, the original fold, and then I just added 1/4 of an inch and went over and scored it, so that now that's my binding. All right, so I went ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I did. I created the signatures, that's what these are called. And it's basically bookbinding 101. And I don't, because it is so labor intensive, I didn't want to sit and make a video of me doing just that. So I'm going to also show you this little trick that I came up with, because this is basically what you have to do. You have to find the size of paper that you want that will be 2 pages. So it's going to be long, and then you're going to cut it so that it doesn't peek out too much. I'm going to make tabs, so stuff's going to stick out, but at this point, this is what you want, and I'll show you how I did that. So I took and I did my measuring, and you can do it however you want. It's really, it's unique, and it's really up to you how you do it. I don't like pokey corners, so I have a corner rounder punch, and I just took my corners, put them in, and rounded them off. And so I did that, just my own it's not a big deal. It's certainly not going to affect your book in any way if you don't, but I just like the way it looks. I like the way it feels, and so that's what I did. So then I have this tool right here, and we sell this at Stampin' Up! And I just made my measurements with a card right here. I made a score with my bone folder, which is incredibly important to this process, because you don't want it to be, if you fold it without measuring, you could have pages that are not equal. And so measuring is really important, and that whole measure twice, cut once, that's really important to this process. So I went ahead and I made my measurements the way I wanted it, and I made 2 marks on a guide sheet. And then when I put my guide sheet up to my paper, I took my piercing, it's like an awl. It's really, really sharp. So if you're doing this with your children, which I encourage you to do this with your children, but I have a feeling that this, if your child is under the age of, I would even say 10, I mean, if they're very crafty and they enjoy doing tedious things, then this would be right up their alley. If they don't, if they have a really short attention span, my suggestion would be to go ahead and either go make them yourself and give them to them for school, or you know, it's just the assembly process is kind of tedious. So I pierced 2 holes, and then I took baker's twine. Now you can use embroidery floss. If you're going to do something bulkier, you could use yarn, but let me tell you, it's challenging. But let me show you how I did it without having to use needles, and to make it easier to thread it through the hole, which can be very challenging. If you'll look very carefully, I don't know how, if my phone, this is a new camera I'm using, I don't know if it'll show you. This is actually kind of like the doodad on the end of your shoelace. I took a piece of tape, and I came up with this, and it really works very well. And so it's a cheap way if you have a whole bunch of kids, or if you just don't have a lot of money, or you really don't want them dealing with needles, then I took this piece of tape, and I did this with every string that I used. And this is what makes it, I think this would make it possible to use something bulkier like a bulky yarn, but I'm using baker's twine, which is it's in between yarn and embroidery floss. It's kind of a thick embroidery floss. Anyway, so now that I've got it and I folded my tape, I'm cutting it as thin as I can without cutting into the yarn itself. And then if you look, I'm cutting at an angle to sort of make a sharp point. And that makes it possible for you to go through an awl hole of this size. It's not very big, it's not a hole punch size, it's just the size of my awl. And I went ahead and I threaded it through. But I mean, that was a little tedious because I had to use the little, I had to make the little, I know there's a name for it, it's not eyelet, I just can't think of it right now. But the little doodads on the end of my yarn, or my baker's twine, I use that tape. And so it's a very low cost solution for this issue of poking your thread through. Now once I've done that, then I poked holes through my binding, and there's a million different ways. I've seen them do a more traditional, where they poke holes at the top and the bottom, and then after they pulled out the main two, they come back through and they bind it, and so that you don't have any of this bulk. But this is mine. I wanted it very low key, very easy, simple, quick, and so that's what I ended up doing. So I pulled all of my binding through, and so you can see the baker's twine in between. Now, okay, this is basic journaling 101, like I said, but now comes the fun part, and that is where just checking my time. This is where you want to start compiling any kind of language you're learning, whether it's Spanish, you know, Latin would be more challenging. You'd probably want to print out some things, but I've got this calendar that I didn't end up using. It was just not, it didn't work for me, but I love the photos in it, and so it's an old calendar, and you could do this with one of your older calendars that maybe you even use,